My uncle didn't want to make me a partner in the family business, preferring to choose his son, who has no experience. However, the competition hired me, and now I'm considered a traitor by them. Hello, I'm a 30-year-old woman, and recently my family has sidelined me for leaving the family business and standing up to my uncle, who is retiring this year. I'm here to ask if I'm wrong. To give you some context, my dad, who would have been 63 this year, had two younger brothers, Brian, 59, and Scott, 56. All three inherited my grandfather's real estate business. My grandfather hoped the three brothers would run the place as co-owners. If everything went well, they would all be fine. However, 6 years after my grandfather retired, my uncle Scott decided to leave the company and start his own business. He was also cut off from the family because no one liked his decision to compete with his own brothers in business. For the past 16 years, no one in the family has spoken to him or even acknowledged his existence, pretending he was never part of the family. I had learned to do the same. Anyway, my dad passed away 3 years ago due to double kidney failure. His health had not been good before that happened, and he had been training me to take over in case he ended up bedridden. Obviously, no one expected him to pass away, but it was good that I was prepared to take on his duties and manage the responsibilities he had in the company. I had been doing his job and helping my uncle Brian run the company for the past 3 years, not only during that time, but since I graduated from business school. I had been working with my father and uncle to learn everything because I eventually hoped to become a partner in the company. It has been almost 9 years since I started working there, and I obviously expected that one day I would be made a partner, as my dad had wanted. However, about 10 days ago, I found out that my uncle had decided to make his son a partner, and I would continue as CFO. When my dad was alive, he was the CEO, and my uncle was the CFO. After my dad passed away, my uncle took over as CEO, and I was promoted to CFO. Now, if someone had to take my uncle's place when he retires in a couple of years, shouldn't it be me? My cousin Dean wasn't even in the picture, so this decision really took me by surprise. He is 23 years old and graduated just a year ago. He has a degree in economics but no practical knowledge or experience. Moreover, he is too young to be a partner in the company. He hasn't paid his dues, and I know for sure that he doesn't deserve it more than I do. Naturally, I was very upset when I found out about this. I didn't even hear it directly from my uncle. It was my mom who told me she had just heard from her sister-in-law, Dean's mom, that I had refused the opportunity to be a partner in the company, so my uncle was offering it to Dean. When my mom told me, I instantly called my uncle because we hadn't had any conversation about it, and I thought it was a joke. But when we talked on the phone, he told me he was indeed considering making Dean the CEO of the company and a partner in the firm because he was going to announce his retirement in a few months. I was in shock. I reminded him that Dean hadn't worked a single day in his life so far. He had spent the whole last year finding himself and exploring, so he was quite inexperienced and definitely not up to the job. Then my uncle told me that apparently, this is where I come in because, as his mentor, he wouldn't have to worry about anything. It's not that they no longer needed me in the company. They still needed me to handle everything while Dean got accustomed to it, and I would continue to be the CFO of the company. But I didn't agree with that. I told him that I had worked very hard for the past 9 years and wanted the respect I deserved. Dean definitely didn't deserve this position, and I made it very clear that I wasn't happy with this decision. I told him that if he decided to make Dean a partner in the firm and the CEO, I would resign and leave the company. My uncle tried to tell me I was overreacting, that he was only doing this to secure Dean's future because he wouldn't settle for anything less than the CEO position. He didn't want to separate from the company like my uncle Scott did, so this was his only option, and he hoped I would understand. He even tried to reassure me by saying that Dean would just be the nominal head of the company, but I would actually be running the show, and he knew that even Dean would respect me. I tried to negotiate with him. I told him I would be willing to settle for my CFO position, but I wanted to be made a partner in the company. He said he didn't know if he could do that because he had to talk to Dean first. But I didn't care. I had done the work and wanted to be CEO and partner, or at least just a partner. He could do that, or I would leave. It was an ultimatum. When my uncle and I ended up fighting over it, he finally told me we lived in a free country, so I could do what I wanted, but his decision was already made. He had also discussed this with the board members and would make his announcement in a few days. His decision was made, and I could accept it or leave, as he had said. It was a terrible day for me to realize exactly where I stood with my uncle because I had always thought we had a good relationship. Clearly, when it came to our relationship in a professional capacity, I had overestimated how close we were. It's also not surprising. Dean has always been quite spoiled, and I'm not surprised that my uncle chose him over me. He's his flesh and blood, so of course, I could never compete. Anyway, I was very upset about how things turned out, and my mom had suggested that I even look for a lawyer and sue them legally, but I didn't want to do that. Instead, I had a better plan in mind that would really upset them. I guess most of you would have been able to figure out what I did after that, but for those who still don't know, I wrote an email to my Uncle Scott that same day. I briefly told him everything that had happened and said I would be willing to work for him now if he accepted me. I didn't feel like sitting around lamenting what I had lost. The only thing on my mind was to get back at my uncle, so I didn't think twice before contacting my Uncle Scott. Within 24 hours, I had a response from him. He said he was willing to offer me the CFO position and would be willing to promote me to CEO in a couple of years after his retirement. He had accepted my terms of making me a partner in the company as well because I was willing to tell him everything I knew about my company to help him. So a couple of days ago, we finally met in person, and it was quite a fun meeting. I had only cut him out of my life because my parents and the rest of my family demanded it. But other than that, I had never had a bad relationship with my Uncle Scott. In fact, he had always been the fun uncle, and until I was 15, he and I were quite close. But then the fallout happened, and he was excluded, and I could never talk to him again until now. When I was younger, they never told me exactly what led to my Uncle Scott separating from the family, and even now when I saw him, he refused to talk about it. But that was his choice, and I needed to respect it. However, he told me he was surprised that my Uncle Brian had done something like this because when my dad was alive, he would never have dared to attempt something like this. Anyway, he was happy because it worked in his favor and said he would love to have me on board. He had only heard good things about me since they were our direct competitors. They had been keeping an eye on us and our operations. He said he knew that what I had done for the company was quite significant and was looking forward to having me on his side this time. He also assured me that unlike Uncle Brian, he didn't have any children, so I didn't have anything to worry about in that aspect. We finalized everything, and I submitted my resignation that same day. Uncle Brian didn't seem to be affected in the slightest by the fact that I was leaving. I sent him a formal message to inform him that I would not be attending for the next 2 weeks since he had made it very clear that the company would be fine without me. He told me that was fine and that he already had replacements ready, so I didn't need to worry about my position. That was it. I didn't interact with him after that. However, yesterday, Uncle Scott and I finally posted a photo together to celebrate the fact that I was joining him. I went out for dinner with the team to meet some of the high-ranking members of his company and socialize with them before starting work. To say that my family is literally falling apart would be an understatement because since I made the post last night, I've been bombarded with text messages, voice messages, and phone calls. Obviously, I haven't responded to anyone, but I can tell that people are very upset. Uncle Brian is furious and has already labeled me a traitor, telling me that he will make sure I suffer the consequences of this move. He can try whatever he wants. I've also been condemned by many other family members, which I find strange because from the messages they sent, it seems they already know that I did all this only because they didn't allow me to be a partner in the firm and overlooked me in favor of Dean. If they didn't talk about the injustice of what they were doing to me at the time, they have no right to criticize me now. The only opinion that really matters to me is my mom's. When I talked to her this morning, she didn't seem happy with my decision either. That really surprised me because a couple of days ago, she had been urging me to go after my uncle with a lawyer to get what is rightfully mine. But now she thinks I'm going too far. She told me there's a lot of history with my Uncle Scott that I simply don't know about, and she doesn't think it's appropriate for me to know either. That was quite frustrating because if they are not going to tell me why exactly Uncle Scott was excluded from the family, I don't think I can decide whether I can trust him or not. I'm a grown woman, so I think I can handle the truth, and they don't need to protect me. So far, from his behavior, he has been very kind to me, and I see no reason to cut him off either. Anyway, my mom said the family was very upset with me and that she herself wasn't happy with this, but if I had already made a decision, there was very little she could do to change it. I tried to talk to her, but she just hung up and said she needed to process what was going on. Now I have incredibly mixed feelings about what's going on. Am I wrong for joining our competitors after my uncle refused to make me a partner in the company and chose his son over me? Edit, hello, some people were confused about how I got the job at Uncle Scott's company so quickly. Well, it was actually pure luck. Their CFO was retiring in a couple of months anyway and had been looking for someone to replace him. Fortunately, I emailed at the right time. That's how I got this opportunity. It's like the stars and planets aligned for me. Also, some of you wanted to know what things were like with Uncle Scott before he was excluded from the family. Honestly, things were never really that bad. When I was younger, my dad, Uncle Brian, and Uncle Scott were always very close from what I had seen. I knew they had a big fight, and that's why Uncle Scott decided to leave the company and start his own business. But to this day, I really don't know what it was about. No one wants to talk about it, so I can't give you that information since I don't have it myself. However, my relationship with him was always good, and I think I mentioned that in my original post as well. Even now, when I reached out to him by writing that email, his response was very cordial and warm. Honestly, I don't know why my family has such a terrible opinion of him. They've called him everything from cunning, narcissistic, selfish, and other things. But every time I've interacted with him, I've never felt he was any of those things. I'm very confused about whom to believe. I really don't want to make a mistake again by trusting someone because I trusted my Uncle Brian, and look where that got me. I don't want the same thing to happen with Uncle Scott as well, so I need to be extra careful about these things. And since my mom isn't exactly happy with me at the moment, I really don't know whom to turn to for advice. I can't talk to my friends about this because it's too personal and complicated. Update 1, it's been 3 days since people found out I was going to work with Uncle Scott. After the initial reaction, people have just stopped talking to me. I guess that's fair. Now that I'm associated with Uncle Scott, they treat me the same way they've treated him. Honestly, I still have no idea what happened between them all those years ago, but I've chosen which side I want to be on, and there's no turning back. To be honest, their history doesn't even matter to me. It's not like I can quit and go back to working with Uncle Brian now. I need a job to support myself and the lifestyle I've gotten used to, and I need a lot of money, obviously. So, whatever it is, I'm here now, and I'm going to make the best of my situation. I talked to Uncle Scott about the way the family is treating me like a pariah. He seemed very sad, but told me this is exactly what happened to him. He said that in time I would get over it too, and maybe I would even be luckier than him since I'm from the younger generation and they might reach out to me in time. But until then, I just have to endure and deal with it. Once again, I asked him what had happened that led to all this, but he refused to talk about it. My mom still hasn't spoken to me, which hurts the most. I've been texting her every day and haven't received a response so far. I'm going to be really busy with work in the next few days because I just started here, and there's a lot of work I need to catch up on. Now if she wants to talk to me, she can text me herself, but other than that, I'm not going to try to contact her anymore. Update 2, it's been 6 days since I started working with Uncle Scott, and things have been going quite well. The paperwork to make me a partner in the company is still being processed, but I trust him implicitly. He has treated me with nothing but warmth and respect so far. I even feel more comfortable than at the old company. I guess I have to say that everyone in my family was wrong about him. He has been very transparent with me about everything that's going on. He told me that unlike my previous company, they are not a private company, so he will have to get the board's approval for everything related to me before he can finalize everything. But he told me not to worry because, as the owner and CEO, it's just a formality, and I have nothing to worry about. As I've already met most of the people associated with the company, and they all seem to like me a lot, they know my previous work and know that I'm worth it. So, just as Uncle Scott told me, I'm not too worried about this situation, and I'm going to focus on working. Things on the work front are going quite well for me, but my personal life is a mess right now, to be honest. My mom and I haven't talked since that last conversation, and I can't even count how many days it's been since then. I've felt really lonely. No one else in the family has talked to me either, and it's hard, but I'm trying to deal with it. I still have some friends from Uncle Brian's company, and they've kept me informed about what's going on. Apparently, they've already announced that I've left, but they didn't include the fact that I left to work with Uncle Scott. Probably because it wouldn't reflect well on the company that someone in a position like mine left to work with their direct competitors. They also announced that Dean will take over as CEO in a couple of months after Uncle Brian retires and that he will also be a partner in the company. They are throwing a work party in his honor in a couple of days. As for the CFO position that was vacant when I left, it's being filled by one of the employees who always had issues with subordination with me. They probably did that on purpose just to annoy me. However, it only made me feel sad for them. If that employee had issues with me, I'm pretty sure they will also have issues with them in the future. But that's a problem they'll have to deal with now. Anyway, I talked to my friends at the company and told them they were free to join me with Uncle Scott now since we could offer them better salaries. Ultimately, it's up to them, but I can tell some of them really want to work with me because they are not too confident about the changes happening in the company and think it would be better for them to resign while they still can. So I made the offer. Let's see who switches sides. Update 3. It's been almost a month since I started working with Uncle Scott, and things have gone very well. I'm now officially the CFO and also a partner in the company. I'm quite happy about it, and although my mom still hasn't talked to me, I think I've moved on. There's also more good news. Some of my friends from my previous company have quit their jobs and applied here so they can work with me. Uncle Scott is quite happy about it. However, Uncle Brian has found this move even more annoying. A few days ago, after almost 4 employees resigned to join us, he showed up at my house with Dean. I had just returned home when the doorbell rang. When I saw it was them, I spoke to them through the intercom. I told them to leave because I didn't want to have any conversation with them about anything. I knew they were here to argue about the fact that I had talked to a couple of employees and influenced their decision to join me, but I told them I hadn't forced or coerced them. They had made this decision on their own. I knew they wanted an excuse to blame me, but even they knew it wasn't my fault. Uncle Brian was out of control and started yelling at me from outside the door, saying I was stealing their employees and it wasn't fair. He threatened to take legal action against me for manipulating his employees. I'm pretty sure that's not grounds for a lawsuit, but I just let him yell until he ran out of voice because I knew it was pointless to say anything while he was yelling so loud that he couldn't even hear me. When he finally seemed to run out of breath, I told him I wanted them to leave, or I would be forced to call the police. With so many people leaving the company, I'm pretty sure they didn't want more people to leave, citing the fact that they seemed mentally unstable. When I said that, Dean suddenly intervened and said that this was not the way to behave with someone who had been there for me for so long after my dad passed away. He called me insensitive and selfish, saying I had no respect for what his father had done for my family. I found all that very pompous and ridiculous. I told him I respected Uncle Brian as much as he respected me. I reminded him that my father had worked very hard to bring this company to where it is now, and after his passing, I had also put in a lot of effort. The only person who had never done anything was Dean, so he had no right to be here talking this way. At least Uncle Brian deserved to be where he is now, but Dean was simply given his position as a form of charity because Uncle Brian didn't want him to leave the company and work elsewhere since it was a family business. Then I continued and told him exactly what Uncle Brian had told me when he said he was offering the CEO position to Dean because his son wanted it and wouldn't settle for less. In my original post, you might remember that I mentioned Uncle told me that the only reason he was offering this position to Dean and not to me was because his son wanted it, even though he knew I deserved it more. He wanted to pamper his son. He also said that Dean would only be the nominal head, but I would actually be running things. I remembered it clearly and mentioned it to Dean so he would know exactly where he stood with his father. Then there was silence. I heard them arguing in low voices and then heard their footsteps walking away and leaving the driveway. So my job was done. Now the two of them could work it out among themselves, but at least they would leave me alone. The next day, I woke up to find that both of them had blocked me, and that made me very happy. Anyway, life is getting better now. I know everything that's happening now would have upset my dad a lot, but at least I have the satisfaction of knowing that none of this was my fault. Uncle Brian became greedy and kicked me out, so if there's anyone to blame for the situation, it's him. I'm very sure about that now, so no one else can try to make me feel guilty and doubt myself. The only person I'm still holding out hope for is my mom. I really hope she eventually changes her mind because we've always had a great relationship, especially after my dad passed away. We started bonding even more. I really miss her every day and keep thinking that maybe she will eventually message me, but so far, I haven't had that luck. At least she hasn't blocked me yet, so maybe she's keeping the door open. I might try to reach out to her if I start missing her too much, but for now, I'm still trying to figure out what to do. Update 4. It's been almost 6 months since my last update, and many things have changed. For starters, Uncle Brian has officially retired, and Dean has taken over the company. So far, he's just maintained the status quo and hasn't done anything different. Maybe things will work out for them after all, but I almost don't care. Since then, many employees who used to work there have joined us, and I'm very happy about it because I can see many familiar faces in my new company. My mom and I still haven't spoken, but I might finally have a reason for that now. A few weeks ago, I was having dinner and drinks with Uncle Scott and his wife. After a while, my aunt left the room to rest, and while we were talking, I finally asked him, given that I'm quite an adult now and we're working together, I felt I really needed to know what had happened between him and the family that led to him being cut off. He finally told me. Years ago, my mom tried to have an affair with him on Thanksgiving, which was being celebrated at our house. She asked him to help her in the kitchen. He followed her, having no idea what was about to happen. Once they were alone in the kitchen, she told him she wanted to take things further with him, and although she was married to my dad, she had always had her eye on him. He tried to pull away from her, and just in time, my dad walked into the kitchen and caught the two of them very close. My mom went crazy and started accusing him of trying to initiate something with her. I don't remember this because Dean and I were in our rooms, but my dad lost his temper and kicked him out of the house that day. Later, I was told that Uncle Scott had to leave because he had a work emergency. However, after that day, my mom made up a bunch of lies to cover up this incident so that no one would believe him. She even told Uncle Brian and my dad that he had been planning to steal money from the company and start something on his own. My dad and Uncle Brian confronted him about it later and told him they would ruin him for real if he didn't step aside on his own. So he decided to leave the company and started his own business. Since then, he's had nothing to do with the family. After learning all this, I decided it would be better to follow in his footsteps and have nothing to do with my family either. It was really sad to find out about my mom, but it is what it is. I've accepted the facts, and this is my life now. Update 5, I'm back with more updates on my situation to tell you how my life has been in the past 8 months. To start, I haven't had any contact with my mom, whom I've blocked. So if she has tried to message or call me, I don't know, but she hasn't tried to reach me by other means. She knows where I live, so she could have come whenever she wanted, but I guess she must have a bit of shame knowing that I know the truth, which makes her look more guilty according to what I believe. But better this way. As for my job, it couldn't be better. It was difficult at first to adapt to this new stage, but I finally feel more comfortable. It was a similar position to my previous one, but it's hard to adapt to the details of another company. Not everything is done the same way. For now, I haven't been promoted to CEO, but that's okay. Not only do I earn more in this job, but I also have more work than I had in my old company. This is because Uncle Brian's company, now presided over by Dean, has been losing clients, and well, ours has been absorbing them. This is due to Dean's lack of experience. Although he has a good education and attended a good university, the distance from theory to practice is considerable. There's even a rumor in the sector that they might remove him from the position and bring someone else to replace him. That someone won't be me since I'm very comfortable in my new stage, although I don't think they'll ask me either because I'm a pariah to that family. But well, that's a bit of what's been happening in my life lately, at least in terms of work. Personally, well, I still don't have much contact with my family, but I've gotten used to it.